What if the person you signed a contract to marry was the one you weren't supposed to fall in love with? The ink was barely dry when Eleanor Shaw realized she had just sold her freedom for a promise. Not money, not really. It was safety, reputation, a way out of a scandal that could have ended her family's legacy overnight. The terms were simple. 1 year of marriage, no intimacy, no interference, no questions. But in a world built on cold deals and quiet lies, nothing stays clean for long. It began on a winter morning in New York, the kind of cold that silences the streets and turns breath into ghosts. Eleanor stood in front of the mirror inside her penthouse dressing room, her reflection crisp and distant, a stranger in a silk dress. Outside, the city blurred in white mist, and the sound of church bells carried faintly through the glass. Her wedding wasn't a celebration, it was a transaction. Her groom, Alexander Vail, was a man who rarely smiled and never asked twice. Billionaire heir to Vail Industries, a dynasty forged in steel and scandal. The tabloids called him ruthless, his business partners called him brilliant, and his ex-fiancées called him something worse. But today, he wasn't playing the charming magnate for the cameras. He was playing a husband. For 1 year. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. There were fewer guests than there were chandeliers. Every vow sounded rehearsed, every smile calculated. Even the kiss, the briefest brush of formality, felt like a contract being sealed. Cameras clicked, flashes erupted, and when it was over, Eleanor's hand felt heavier than the diamond ring that sealed her fate. Later that evening, inside the Vail mansion, silence hung like smoke. The house itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture, glass, marble, and steel, yet it felt colder than the snow outside. Eleanor wandered through the corridors, tracing her fingers along the walls, searching for something warm, something human. But the only warmth came from the faint scent of sandalwood and bourbon that lingered wherever Alexander went. He found her standing by the window, staring into the city lights below. "You don't have to pretend," he said quietly, setting a glass on the table beside her. "This isn't a fairy tale." Eleanor turned to face him. "I'm not pretending, are you?" He looked at her for a long moment, too long, then gave the faintest smile. Always. That night, she slept in a room 3 doors away from his. The sound of the wind outside mixed with the soft hum of the city, and in the distance, she could hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the dark. Time counting down the days until the contract would end. But the world outside didn't wait. The next morning, tabloids splashed headlines across every major outlet. "The Ice King marries the fallen socialite." Rumors whispered through boardrooms and parties that she was his latest business move. A way to quiet a lawsuit, distract investors, manipulate the markets. Some said she was blackmailing him. Others claimed he was saving her. Only the two of them knew the truth, and neither intended to speak it. Weeks passed in polite silence. They shared breakfast in the same room. Never conversation. They attended charity galas arm in arm. Their smiles practiced, their chemistry precise enough to convince the world, but never each other. Every move was performance. Every touch was scripted. Until the night everything cracked. It happened in February, on the eve of Vail Industries' annual winter gala. Snow drifted past the windows as Eleanor descended the grand staircase in an emerald gown that shimmered under the chandelier. Alexander was waiting below, adjusting his cufflinks, expression unreadable. For a moment, the world seemed to slow, his gaze rising, hers faltering, and in that suspended breath, something unspoken passed between them. But it wasn't love, not yet. It was recognition, the rare kind. The kind that says, "You're just as trapped as I am." The gala was a performance of wealth, gold, and champagne, laughter that never reached the eyes, deals sealed behind closed doors. Eleanor played her part flawlessly, smiling through the whispers, shaking hands with people who measured worth in rumors. But when she saw Alexander across the room speaking quietly with a woman she didn't recognize, something stirred. Jealousy. No, not jealousy. Something colder. Curiosity. Later, in the car ride home, she asked him who the woman was. He didn't answer immediately. The city lights flashed across his face, fragments of gold and shadow. Finally, he said, "A reminder of who I used to be." Eleanor didn't press. But that night, she couldn't sleep, because for the first time, she realized she wanted to know. Days turned into weeks. The silence between them softened, not into affection, but understanding. She discovered his small habits, the way he always stood by the window at dawn, the way he read contracts like novels, the way he never finished a cup of coffee. He noticed hers, how she hummed when she was nervous, how she hid old photographs in the drawers, how she flinched at the sound of breaking glass. They didn't speak about it, but they saw, and seeing became dangerous. One night, Eleanor found Alexander in his study, the lights dim, his jacket draped over the chair. Papers were scattered across the desk, legal drafts, letters, photos. She recognized one instantly, a picture of her father, smiling beside Alexander at a gala years before she met him. She froze. "What is this?" she asked. Alexander didn't look up. "Business with my family." He exhaled, slow, tired. "It doesn't concern you anymore." But it did, because now she knew their marriage hadn't been a coincidence. He hadn't chosen her out of convenience. It had been planned, arranged not by love or loyalty, but leverage. That night, Eleanor walked the length of the house barefoot, her pulse echoing in her ears. The contract had promised her protection from debt, from ruin, from the vultures circling her family's collapse. But what if Alexander was one of them? The next morning, she confronted him. "I deserve the truth," she said. "You deserve peace," he replied. "Then give me that, give me honesty." He looked at her then, and for the first time, something cracked in his voice. "If I tell you everything, you'll never look at me the same way again." For a long time, neither spoke. Outside, the sky broke open with rain. Over the next few weeks, something shifted between them, not trust, but tension thick enough to breathe. The world kept watching, believing in their picture-perfect marriage, while behind the mansion's glass walls, secrets pressed like ghosts against the edges of truth. One evening, during a charity event in London, Eleanor found herself alone on the terrace, the city lights flickering below. She could feel him watching from the doorway, that quiet, calculating presence she'd come to recognize in a crowd. "You don't like crowds," he said, joining her. "I don't like lies," she replied softly. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then you shouldn't have married me." There was a silence, not cold, but fragile. And in that silence, she asked, almost whispering, "Was there ever a part of this that was real?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion behind his eyes. Then he said, "You were never supposed to matter, it should have hurt." But instead it felt like a confession. From that night onward, something invisible tied them together, not affection, not forgiveness, but the quiet ache of two people who'd built walls only to find themselves trapped inside the same one. Eleanor began noticing the small things again, the way he hesitated before speaking, the way he lingered near her when he thought she wouldn't notice, the way his voice softened whenever he said her name. The man she had married for protection was no longer the same man standing beside her in silence. And maybe she wasn't the same woman anymore either. Spring came slowly, melting the ice that had covered the estate for months. With it came rumors that Alexander was planning to dissolve Vale Industries, that hidden accounts and unspoken debts were beginning to surface. Eleanor heard whispers from investors, saw late-night phone calls, watched the empire tremble, and through it all, Alexander said nothing. Until one night, he handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "The end of the contract." "It's early," he nodded once. "You're free." She stared at the papers, her pulse hollow. Freedom, the thing she thought she wanted most. But now, standing there in the dim light of their marble kitchen, it felt like loss. "Why now?" she asked. His voice was low, almost breaking. "Because if I don't end it, I won't be able to let you go." And for the first time, she saw him not as the billionaire, not as the strategist, but as a man who had built his life on control, only to lose it to someone who was never meant to matter. The next morning he was gone. No note, no call, just silence and the faint scent of sandalwood that lingered on her pillow. Outside, the city had begun to thaw. Reporters crowded the gates. Headlines shouted betrayal, bankruptcy, disappearance. And in the quiet of the empty mansion, Eleanor finally opened the last drawer of his study. Inside, she found a single photograph worn at the edges, folded neatly. It was the same picture she'd seen before, her father and Alexander, years ago. But this time, on the back, written in faded ink, were 6 words that changed everything. "He promised I'd always protect you." And in that moment, Eleanor understood their marriage had never been about money. It had been about a promise made long before she ever knew his name. But if Alexander had disappeared to protect her, from whom? The question lingered like fog on glass, as the sound of distant sirens filled the city. And the truth, whatever it was, waited just beyond the door she hadn't yet dared to open. The air inside the Vale mansion had changed. It no longer smelled of sandalwood and steel, but of dust and absence. The silence was deeper now, the kind that pressed against the skin and hummed in the bones. Days had passed since Alexander's disappearance, but to Eleanor, time no longer moved. It hovered, suspended in that endless moment when she found the photograph and read the words written on the back. "He promised I'd always protect you." But as she traced the faded ink again and again, something shifted inside her recognition. Her father's promise to her had always been the same. "I'll make sure you're safe, no matter what it costs." She had thought those were just words. But what if they were part of something larger? What if the cost had already been paid? In the days that followed, Eleanor tried to reach Alexander. His office was empty, his phones disconnected. His board claimed ignorance. The press called it a strategic retreat. But in the quiet corners of the city, in the whispers that traveled between bankers, lawyers, and old family rivals, another story began to surface. Vale Industries was collapsing from within. Hidden accounts, forged documents, debts buried under layers of shell companies. Eleanor didn't believe he had simply run. He wasn't the kind to flee. Alexander Vale faced storms head-on, even if it meant going down with the ship. So if he was gone, someone had made him disappear. The first clue came 3 nights later. She was sitting alone in his study, the only room she hadn't yet locked. The fireplace had gone cold, the papers untouched. She was staring at the photograph again when she heard a faint hum, a flicker of light, just beneath the edge of the desk. She leaned down and saw it, a hidden compartment, barely visible, disguised as part of the paneling. Inside there was a small flash drive. Her hands shook as she connected it to Alexander's old laptop. The screen came alive with static, then resolved into a folder of files, documents, videos, and one recording named for Eleanor. Eleanor, his voice began, calm, steady, unmistakably him. If you're listening to this, it means things have gone wrong. You were never supposed to find out this way. He paused, the sound of rain faintly audible in the background. Your father and I made a deal 8 years ago. He needed help. Your family was drowning in debt, surrounded by people who wanted blood. I agreed to protect him, in exchange for something only he could give. A name, a connection, a key. Her father had died years ago, officially of a stroke, but she remembered how strange those final months had been. The late-night calls, the unspoken tension, the sense that he was carrying a secret too heavy to name. Alexander's voice continued, quieter now. When your father died, the debts didn't disappear. They changed hands. You were next in line and I couldn't let them touch you. That's why the contract marriage existed. Not to save my company, but to keep you hidden in plain sight. The only way to protect you was to make you mine. The recording ended abruptly. No goodbye, no instructions, just static. Eleanor sat frozen, the words echoing in the dim light. To keep you hidden in plain sight. From who? And why now? After all these years, had he disappeared just as the truth was surfacing? That night, she couldn't sleep. The house creaked inside around her, as if remembering. The moonlight spilled across the floorboards, silver and soft, catching the edges of the photograph she'd left on the desk. She thought about the man she had married, the man who had signed her freedom away and yet, somehow, might have been the only one who ever tried to save her. By morning, the decision was made. She would find him. The trail began in silence, fragments of clues buried in his calendar entries, travel receipts, encrypted messages that led her from New York to London, and from London to the grey edges of Zurich, where Vale Industries had its offshore accounts. Each step uncovered something new, a name here, a hidden account there, a woman's voice on the phone that always hung up when she said her name. In Zurich, she met a man who called himself Michael Wren, one of Alexander's old advisors. He was tall, sharp and cautious, the kind of man who only spoke when the room was soundproof. You shouldn't be here, he told her, eyes flicking toward the frosted glass door. And if you're looking for him, someone else is already looking for you. He studied her for a long moment, then slid a single folder across the table. He left this with me 6 months ago, said if anything ever happened, you'd know what to do. Inside the folder was a single piece of paper, a photograph of a mansion she didn't recognize, surrounded by cliffs and fog. When she looked up to ask what it meant, Wren was gone. 2 days later, she was standing at the edge of the Scottish Highlands, wind tearing through her coat, the sky a bruised shade of grey. The coordinates led her to an estate abandoned, yet guarded, its windows shuttered, its gardens overgrown. It looked like a place built to be forgotten. She pushed through the rusted gate, her boots sinking into the damp earth. Somewhere inside she could hear faint music, a piano, playing slowly, imperfectly, a melody she knew. It was Alexander's. The door creaked open under her hand, revealing a grand hall coated in dust. Candles flickered on a table, half burned. And then, at the far end of the room, she saw him. He was thinner, pale, his usually sharp suit replaced by a wool sweater and dark slacks. His eyes lifted when he saw her, surprise flashing, then something deeper. Guilt. Eleanor's voice trembled. For a long time neither moved. The air between them felt fragile like glass. Finally, she took a step forward. You said you'd protect me. From what? From them, the people your father owed. The ones who built their power by destroying others. I made deals to keep them at bay. But now, they want something else. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. They want you. The words hit like thunder. Me. Why? Because you're the only one who can access what your father left behind. A fund, an encrypted trust that controls billions. Money meant to expose them if he ever died. They think you have the key. I don't, she said. I don't know anything about that. He met her eyes then, and the look on his face was enough to make her heart stop. You do. You've had it all along. You just don't realize it. Outside, wind howled through the broken shutters. Somewhere in the distance a car engine roared, faint, but closing in. Alexander exhaled, slow and steady like a man preparing for war. By finishing what your father started, they spent the night piecing through old files, maps, and ledgers scattered across the mansion's study. Every document led deeper into a web of corruption, politicians, corporations, entire foundations built on laundered money and erased identities. Vale Industries had been one of them, at least before Alexander tried to dismantle it from within. By dawn, the truth had begun to take shape. Her father had discovered a system that could cripple some of the world's most powerful men. But before he died, he passed one of them to her, not as a file, not even as a code. Eleanor remembered suddenly her father's old watch, heavy gold, engraved with a phrase she'd never understood, Eternum Fide, forever in faith. It had been left to her, untouched in a jewelry box in New York. Alexander's eyes met hers, realization dawning. The sound of tires on gravel echoed outside. They ran through the back halls, down the narrow stone steps that led to the cliffs. The air was sharp with salt and rain. Behind them, footsteps, voices, flashlights cutting through the mist. "Keep going," Alexander shouted, his voice breaking through the roar of the wind. They reached the edge of the cliff, where the sea churned below like black glass. There was nowhere left to run. Eleanor turned, breathless, heart pounding. He looked at her then. No walls, no mask. The sound bounced off the cliffs, echoing into the sea. Eleanor froze, her breath catching as Alexander stumbled, a crimson bloom spreading across his side. "Go," he whispered, but he pressed the flash drive, the same one that held his message, into her hand. "You'll know what to do when the time comes. Find the watch, finish it." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Eleanor turned toward the sound, a shadowed figure emerging from the mist, and when she looked back, Alexander was gone. The sea below roared like thunder, swallowing the echoes of everything that had been. Eleanor stood there, trembling, the flash drive clutched against her chest. Somewhere beneath the endless gray sky, she could still hear the faint echo of his voice. You were never supposed to matter, but she did. And now, she was the only one left who could uncover the truth. As dawn broke across the cliffs, painting the sea in pale gold, Eleanor walked away from the edge, not as a wife, not as a pawn, but as the heir to a secret powerful enough to burn empires. Behind her, the waves erased the last trace of the man she'd married for protection, and learned to love only when it was too late. Ahead of her, the world waited, and somewhere buried beneath the lies and ashes, so did the next piece of the promise he had died to keep. Eleanor didn't stop moving until the cliffs behind her vanished into mist and the roar of the sea faded into memory. Her boots were soaked, her coat torn by brambles along the winding path that led away from the estate. The flash drive burned in her pocket, a small, hard weight against her hip, as though it were alive, demanding she understand its secret. Each step felt like a negotiation with fear itself, fear of what she might uncover, and fear of what had just happened. Alexander was gone, but the world he'd shielded her from was alive, twisting, breathing, and now it was hunting her. She found refuge in a small inn perched on the edge of a quiet village, a place forgotten by maps and by time. The inn smelled of peat smoke and damp wool, and the low hum of a fire in the hearth created a fragile sense of safety. Eleanor sat by the window, the flash drive cupped in her hands, and for the first time allowed herself to feel the weight of loneliness. Not the empty solitude of a mansion, but the terrifying absence of someone she had come to trust with her very life. She remembered the cliff, the flash of crimson, the way Alexander's eyes had held hers in that last instant. The memory was sharp, jagged, a raw thing lodged in her chest that refused to soften. Her mind raced, replaying every detail of the past weeks, the hidden compartments, the recording, the cryptic coordinates, the Scottish Highlands, and now this, the sudden disappearance, the threat she didn't fully understand, the undeniable truth that she had been thrust into a game far bigger than she realized. Hours passed, shadows shifted across the walls, lengthening and curling like tendrils, until the inn's quiet was broken by the soft creak of the door. Eleanor turned sharply, her heart hammering, expecting an intruder. Instead, a man entered, tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a long coat damp from the mist outside. His presence was abrupt, almost cinematic in the way he filled the room, and his eyes, dark and calculating, landed on her immediately. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, but not hostile. There was a strange weight to it, like a warning wrapped in civility. "Neither should you," Eleanor replied, standing, though the chair creaked beneath her. Her hand instinctively hovered near her pocket where the flash drive rested. The man studied her, and for a moment the tension between them was a tangible thing, thick enough to slice. Then he smiled, faint, almost imperceptible. "I'm not here to harm you, but I am here because you have something that belongs to others, something dangerous." Eleanor's pulse spiked. "Who sent you?" He shook his head. "No one. I work alone, and I suspect that even if someone had sent me, I wouldn't take orders from them. Not in this situation. I'm here because I know Alexander Vale is still alive." The words hit her like ice water. She stumbled back against the wall, eyes wide. "Alive? You're saying he didn't fall?" "He didn't," the man confirmed, his gaze piercing. "He's alive, but he's trapped, and so are you, whether you know it or not." Eleanor's mind raced, her hands trembling. The flash drive felt suddenly heavier, almost pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Then why did he leave me?" The man stepped closer, voice softening. "To protect you, and to force you to act. He couldn't do it alone. He trusted that you could handle what comes next, even if you didn't believe it yet." Her stomach knotted. Act handle? She didn't understand. She was still processing the cliff, the gunfire, the flash drive, and now the revelation that Alexander was alive. It felt like the world was spinning, faster and faster, and she was running just to keep up. "Listen," the man continued, producing a small tablet from his coat, flicking it on. A map appeared, encrypted coordinates, red circles marking locations across Europe. "These are his safe houses, but they're not safe anymore. Someone has tracked him, someone who knows what he was protecting, and now they're coming for you too. That's why he left the flash drive with you. It's the key to everything." Eleanor stared at the map, a complex web of connections unfolding in front of her eyes. Every dot represented danger, secrecy, power, her father's legacy, Alexander's battles, her own survival, all entwined in a puzzle she had barely begun to understand. "You have to find him," the man said, tone sharp, almost commanding. "Before they do, before whatever they want reaches him or you." She nodded, breath shallow, her mind already calculating, planning. She didn't know if she had the strength, but she had no choice. The days that followed were a blur of travel, careful observation, and relentless pursuit. Eleanor moved like a shadow through cities that were alive with light and danger. Paris, with its rainy alleyways and cafes. Vienna, with its cold stone streets and faint echoes of old secrets. Prague, where fog clung to the river and whispered in the narrow lanes. Each location revealed fragments, coded messages left in plain sight, familiar symbols Alexander had used for years, clues hidden in art galleries, libraries, and banks. But with every discovery, the threat grew. Figures appeared where she least expected them. A driver who had no business on a quiet street. A man following too closely on the subway. A message slipped under a hotel door with only a single word: stop. Eleanor began to notice subtle changes in herself. The fear that had once paralyzed her now sharpened her senses. She observed, memorized, calculated. She remembered Alexander's lessons, his patience, his caution, his ability to read danger like a living thing. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to move through the world as he had, always a step ahead, always questioning every shadow. Yet with each step forward, questions piled higher. Why had Alexander not contacted her directly? Why had he allowed her to carry this alone? Was his disappearance truly a sacrifice for her safety, or was there something he was hiding? The turning point came on a rainy night in Vienna. Eleanor had tracked a lead to an old warehouse near the Danube. Its windows were dark, the doors locked, yet the interior flickered faintly with candlelight. She slipped inside, careful, every sense alert. The warehouse was empty, or so it seemed. Then, from the shadows, a voice called out, "I knew you'd come." She spun. A woman stepped forward, tall, elegant, and impossibly composed. Her hair was black as night, her eyes cold, calculating. "You're Eleanor Vale now, aren't you? Or should I say, sure." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, faint, dangerous. "Let's just say I have an interest in Alexander Vale, and you've stumbled into a game much bigger than you realize." She produced a small device, a phone, but old-fashioned, secured in a steel case. She placed it on a table. "This contains everything Alexander has hidden. All the evidence, all the keys, everything your father left behind. And I need you to hand it over." Eleanor's heart skipped. "Why should I trust you?" The woman's smile didn't waver. "Because if you don't, he dies, and so do you." A wave of cold fear washed over Eleanor, stronger than anything she had felt before. For the first time, the weight of the flash drive and the memory of Alexander's sacrifice collided. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was a question of morality, trust, and the true cost of secrets kept too long. She took a step back, realizing how alone she truly was. Alexander's voice echoed in her mind. "You'll know what to do when the time comes." The time was now. But the clarity she sought was still beyond reach. She didn't know who was friend or foe. She didn't know if Alexander had misjudged the danger, or if he had set a trap even for her. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the warehouse in a harsh, fleeting glow. Eleanor's eyes fell on the device. The weight of choice pressed on her chest, suffocating. And then she noticed something she hadn't before, a small symbol etched into the corner of the device. It was Alexander's mark. Her breath caught. He had left a clue, even here, even now. But why? What was he telling her? And more importantly, what had he left hidden that could turn the game in her favor, or destroy everything she had fought for? The rain hammered against the roof. Shadows moved. Footsteps approached from the back entrance. Eleanor's pulse raced. Her mind spun with strategy and fear, but beneath it all was a flicker of certainty. Alexander had never truly left her. He had left pieces of himself, pieces of the plan, and now it was up to her to assemble them before it was too late. She took a deep breath, lifting the device with deliberate care. "I'm ready," she whispered. But even as the words left her lips, she realized the truth. She had no idea what ready really meant. From the far corner of the warehouse, a faint movement caught her eye, and with it, the first real hint that this game was about to change completely. Someone else was here. Someone who had been waiting for her. Someone who knew more about Alexander's secrets than even she did. And in that moment, Eleanor understood the stakes had escalated far beyond survival. It was no longer just about finding him. It was about uncovering a network of truths, lies, and hidden desires that could destroy empires and change everything she thought she knew about the man she had loved, and the man she had married for protection. The rain outside intensified, slamming against the windows like a warning. And inside the warehouse, Eleanor took her first step toward a revelation that would alter everything. But the question lingered, electric and insistent. Who was the shadow moving toward her friend? Enemy or something in between? And when the truth finally came, would she be ready for it? The shadow moved closer, fluid and silent, and Eleanor instinctively pressed the device to her chest as though it could shield her from the unknown. The warehouse seemed to shrink around her, the dark corners curling in, swallowing sound, light, and certainty. The rain outside hammered against the metal roof, each strike a heartbeat in the growing storm of tension. Her pulse matched it, quick and erratic, as she braced herself trying to read the figure in front of her. When the figure finally stepped into the dim candlelight, she saw a face she had never expected, someone who belonged to both the past and the present. A man, mid-30s, sharp, familiar in a way that set her teeth on edge. His eyes held a mixture of admiration and danger, intelligence and calculation. "Eleanor Vale," he said, the name like a trigger, weighted with implication. "I've been waiting a long time for you to arrive." Her voice caught in her throat. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know everything that matters, and I know what Alexander left behind." Her hands tightened around the flash drive, the only piece of the puzzle she had. "Then you know I can't trust you, correct?" he replied. "And that's why you need me." Eleanor's chest tightened. The device pulsed against her palm, almost in rhythm with her escalating fear. She took a step back, eyes darting to the entrances, to the shadows. "Why? What are you?" He stepped forward again, deliberate, measured, but each step felt like a drumbeat. "I'm someone who understands the consequences of power, of secrets. And I'm here because someone wants to end what your father and Alexander started permanently." The words sank in, heavy and suffocating. Permanently. They weren't just threats, they were promises. And Eleanor felt the first real raw weight of the responsibility that had been thrust on her shoulders. "I don't even know where to begin," she admitted, voice low, trembling. Her mind raced through the past weeks. The flash drive, the clues, the safe houses, Alexander's vanishing act. "I don't even know what Alexander wanted me to do." He tilted his head, gaze sharp. "You do, more than you realize. The problem is, you've been playing catch-up, and now time is running out." Outside, the storm intensified. Rain lashed the windows, wind rattled the beams, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a warning. Eleanor felt trapped, the space around her shrinking as if the warehouse itself had become a pressure chamber. "Show me," she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Tell me everything now." The man nodded. "Very well, but understand this. You can't go back once you see the full picture." He moved to a corner of the warehouse and flicked a switch. The shadows retreated, revealing a wall covered in photographs, maps, and documents pinned with meticulous precision. Strings connected them like veins, running from one city to another, one name to another. Eleanor took a hesitant step forward, overwhelmed by the sheer complexity. "This," he said, voice low and deliberate, "is Alexander's network. Everything he discovered, every transaction your father uncovered, every secret that powerful people wanted buried. It's all here, and it's all vulnerable." Her eyes scanned the wall, absorbing the chaos of information. Faces of people she'd never met, locations she'd never visited, codes she couldn't yet decipher. And at the center of it all, a photograph of Alexander, taken months ago, smiling faintly but with eyes that betrayed the weight of unseen burdens. Eleanor felt a hollow ache in her chest. Why didn't he leave me more guidance? Why put me in this position alone? The man's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "He couldn't. Not without drawing attention to you. Not without tipping off the people who would kill him to get to you. This was always meant to be a test, and you've passed more than he expected." Her stomach churned, a mix of relief and terror. Passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. And still, the danger loomed tangible, invisible, relentless. A sudden crash outside broke the fragile quiet. Eleanor spun, heart hammering. Shadows flitted across the windows, accompanied by the faint click of shoes on stone. Someone else had arrived, and it wasn't coming to negotiate. The man moved swiftly, placing a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Stay calm. They're looking for the flash drive. If they find it, everything Alexander protected is gone." Her breath came in short bursts. She hadn't realized until that moment how alone she truly felt, not just in space, but in consequence. Every step she had taken had led her to this precipice, and now the weight of history, power, and secrecy pressed against her from all sides. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouette sharp against the stormlit night. Eleanor could see only the outline, but the intent was clear, precise, lethal, and unrelenting. "Now you see why I had to come," the man whispered. "You can't do this alone. And yet, you must act." She nodded, her hands trembling but her resolve hardening. She wasn't just a pawn anymore. She was a key player in a game where every choice could mean life or death, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of clarity, not just fear, but purpose. The shadow moved closer, faster now, and Eleanor's mind snapped into a rhythm of calculation, memory, and instinct. Each detail she had gathered over weeks, every alley, every code, every hidden message became part of a strategy she hadn't realized she could execute. The intruder lunged. Eleanor pivoted, using the corner of the table as cover. The man beside her moved with practiced precision, blocking, parrying, creating space. Time slowed, every heartbeat stretched, every breath measured, every shadow holding danger. Eleanor's hand found the flash drive. She clutched it like a lifeline, her vision narrowing to the point of singular focus. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her, chaos and urgency, tension coiled and ready to snap. A gun clicked. Eleanor froze. The intruder had produced a weapon, trained on the man beside her, and in that instant, everything shifted. This wasn't just about protecting a secret anymore. It was about survival. It was about making impossible choices in impossible moments. She realized, with a sudden, almost terrifying clarity, that Alexander had trained her for this without her knowing it. Every lesson, every observation, every detail she'd absorbed in pursuit of him had led to this very moment, a test of instincts, courage, and resolve. The intruder's eyes flicked to her. "Give it to me," the voice demanded, low and controlled, "or everything dies." Eleanor's mind raced. The man beside her was strong, capable, but even he could only hold off one person for so long. And the flash drive, the key to billions, to secrets, to survival, pulsed like a heartbeat in her hand. She realized the truth. She had choices she hadn't understood until now. She could surrender the drive and survive, but lose everything Alexander had fought for. Or she could fight, risking her life, and protect the legacy, protect him, and perhaps, finally, protect herself. Lightning cracked outside, illuminating the warehouse in a harsh, white glare. Eleanor's pulse raced. Her hand tightened around the drive. She had come too far to turn back now. The intruder advanced, step by calculated step. The man beside her tensed, ready to act. But Eleanor knew the next move had to be hers. And then she saw it, a subtle reflection in the glass panels behind the intruder, a tiny movement, almost imperceptible. Another player, another unknown factor she hadn't anticipated. Someone was already manipulating the board from the shadows. Eleanor froze, the gravity of the moment sinking in. Every second now mattered. Every heartbeat carried the weight of consequences she could not yet see. She realized that this confrontation, this storm, this threat, this moment was only the beginning. The intruder raised the weapon and Eleanor's breath caught. Her vision narrowed. The flash drive pulsed against her palm, as if alive, as if aware of what was at stake. And in that heartbeat, Eleanor understood the stakes fully. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the truth, the power, and the legacy she had inherited, and the dangerous twisting path that would lead her to Alexander, alive or not. The storm outside intensified, slamming rain against the walls, and Eleanor's heart matched its rhythm. She braced herself, knowing the next moments would decide everything, her life, his, and the hidden world Alexander had built and vanished into. And then, just as the intruder moved to strike, Eleanor made a decision, one that would change everything, and force the secrets Alexander had hidden into the open. The flash drive glowed faintly in her palm, heavy with promise, danger, and revelation. And in that instant, Eleanor stepped forward, ready to confront the storm head-on, knowing that whatever came next would define her and the legacy she had been chosen to protect. Outside, the wind howled. The rain screamed. Inside, the silence broke, and the first move of the final game had begun. The next moment would change everything. Eleanor's foot pressed against the wet concrete floor. The flash drive clutched tight as if it were a lifeline, as if it could anchor her to reality in the chaos around her. The intruder's weapon glinted in the harsh warehouse light, each movement calculated, deliberate. Rain lashed against the windows, water streaking down the glass like tears. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, every heartbeat loud, every breath a countdown. She could feel the weight of everything Alexander, her father, the secrets, the money, the lives that depended on her choices pressing against her chest. She didn't think she acted. A sudden pivot, a shove of momentum, and the intruder staggered. Eleanor moved faster than she had ever moved before, ducking low, driving her shoulder into his midsection. The gun clattered to the floor. Her hands closed around it instinctively, though she didn't raise it. She needed answers, not death. "Stop!" she shouted, voice cutting through the rain's roar. "I want to know why. I want to know what this is really about." The intruder froze, chest heaving, eyes narrowing. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into," he growled, voice edged with both warning and admiration. "You're not just a messenger, you're a trigger." Eleanor's fingers curled around the gun, knuckles white. "Then tell me the truth." For a long moment, the world held its breath. Rain pounded, shadows swayed. The man's gaze flickered toward the wall of photographs and strings, toward the elaborate network Alexander had created. And then, as if a dam had broken inside him, he spoke. "Alexander, he's alive," the man said, "and he's in danger. Not from outsiders, from those closest to him. The people he trusted most have betrayed him. Your father's enemies. They were only the beginning. There's someone higher, someone with power you can't even imagine." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Then why leave me? Why the flash drive? Why put me in this position?" "Because," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "you are the only one he trusts to finish what he started. He can't reach you directly. Not now, not without risking everything. And he knew you had the instincts, the courage, the mind to survive this storm." Her hands shook. The flash drive burned against her palm as though alive, as though it contained more than data, as though it contained Alexander himself, A memory, a promise, a life. And then, a sudden sound, a soft click, the faintest whisper of movement from behind her. Eleanor spun, gun raised, and caught sight of a figure emerging from the shadows. Alexander, but he was not the man she remembered. He was thinner, gaunt, his clothes disheveled, face marked with fatigue and faint bruises. His eyes, though, burned with the same intensity, the same fire she had seen when they first stood on the cliffs in Scotland. He was alive, he was real, and he was standing there, just beyond reach, like a ghost she had been chasing through storms and lies. "Eleanor," he whispered, voice rough but unmistakable. "You shouldn't have come here." "I had no choice," she said, stepping forward, each movement deliberate, cautious. "I had to find you. I had to understand." He shook his head, and for a moment, the weight of years, of secrets, of sacrifices pressed down on him. "Understanding comes at a cost," he said, "and you've already paid more than you realize." The intruder stepped back, lowering his weapon, a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. "She's ready," he said quietly, "and you know it." Alexander's gaze shifted to the flash drive in Eleanor's hand. Recognition flared, then a shadow of pain. "That's it," he said softly. "Everything, all of it. It's the key to stopping them, to dismantling the empire they built on lies." Eleanor's breath caught. "Then tell me what to do. Tell me where to start." He moved closer, voice low, precise. "We expose them, one by one, every name, every account, every transaction, every betrayal, and we do it in a way that they can't hide from. But it has to be exact, clean, surgical. One misstep." His gaze locked with hers, and we lose everything, including each other. Her chest tightened. The reality hit her like a wave. This wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about trust, about morality, about facing a world that had never been kind, and bending it to truth without losing herself. For a moment, Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the sound of rain, the faint hum of electricity from the warehouse, the rhythm of her own heartbeat, wash over her. And in that stillness, she understood the truth that had been hidden beneath the layers of betrayal, fear, and secrecy. Alexander had never left her. He had guided her, trained her, trusted her. The flash drive, the clues, the test, it had all been preparation. She had been the final variable, the piece he could not protect with force or strategy. Her eyes opened, resolve hardening. "Then we finish this," she said, voice steady, firm. "Together." Alexander nodded, the faintest flicker of a smile breaking through the weariness on his face. "Together," he echoed. The intruder stepped aside, acknowledging the unspoken alliance. Outside, the storm began to lessen, though the clouds still churned violently, a reminder that danger was far from over. Eleanor and Alexander turned to the wall of evidence, the sprawling map of secrets, lies, and threats. The room was a nexus of power, a visual manifestation of everything they had to dismantle, everything they had to confront. Hours passed. Plans were whispered, strategies outlined, codes decrypted. Each revelation brought them closer to the truth, closer to understanding the full scale of the danger and the depth of the conspiracy. Eleanor traced her finger along lines of connections, each one a thread linking names, places, betrayals. Alexander guided her, his hand steady, voice calm but intense, teaching her the rhythm of the fight, the pattern of the storm. And then, amid the rush of realization, Eleanor found the critical piece, the final key hidden in plain sight. It was a ledger, overlooked, tucked beneath the floorboards, a record of accounts, names, and transactions that could dismantle the hidden empire built from her father's old enemies and their new collaborators. It contained the blueprint of everything Alexander had been trying to protect, the tool that could level the playing field, and the proof that could bring them justice. She stared at it, disbelief and awe flooding through her. The weight of the moment pressed down, and yet, for the first time, she felt a surge of hope. The storm was still raging, the enemies still closing in, but now they had the leverage, the truth, the means to strike back. Alexander placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. "Are you ready?" he asked. His eyes searched hers, seeking not confirmation but understanding, trust, and resolve. "I am," Eleanor said, voice firm, filled with the weight of everything she had endured, everything she had learned, everything she had become. Outside, the storm broke. Rain softened into mist, wind became a whisper, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside the warehouse, the two of them stood together, surrounded by the artifacts of secrecy and betrayal, facing the nexus of power they were about to challenge. And then, a faint vibration, almost imperceptible, pulsed from the flash drive in her hand. A warning, a message, a countdown. Eleanor's eyes met Alexander's. The silent understanding between them was electric, unspoken, profound. They had reached the threshold. The storm had brought them here, to the precipice of truth, and beyond this moment, there would be no turning back. Every instinct told her that the next steps would decide everything, not just their survival, but the fate of the people, the empire, and the hidden truths that had been buried for decades. Her fingers tightened around the flash drive. The ledger lay open before them. The map of secrets glowed faintly in the dim candlelight. Alexander's presence, steady and unwavering, grounded her. The intruder, now ally, moved to a vantage point, scanning the perimeter with meticulous precision. Silence stretched, charged and taut, before the inevitable surge of action. Eleanor exhaled slowly. The rain outside had softened into a mist, the storm abating but leaving traces of chaos in its wake. She felt the first real sense of control she had since Alexander disappeared, the realization that she was no longer a pawn. She was a player. She was a force. Alexander's voice broke the quiet, low and deliberate. This is it. Everything we've worked toward, every risk, every sacrifice, it ends here. Her gaze traveled across the room. The map, the ledger, the flash drive, the interdeturnali. And in that moment, Eleanor understood the enormity of what lay ahead. The fight would be fierce, the stakes higher than ever, and the outcome uncertain. But she was ready. The storm outside lingered as a whisper. Inside, the air trembled with anticipation. Eleanor and Alexander exchanged a look, a silent promise, a connection forged through danger, trust, and unspoken devotion. The next move would change everything. And as the mist swirled outside the warehouse, Eleanor stepped forward, hand steady, mind sharp, heart ready, into the beginning of the end. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, brushing the warehouse with pale gold. Mist lingered over the river outside, curling in gentle waves like smoke rising from a distant fire. Eleanor stood at the edge of the room, the flash drive and ledger laid open before her. Alexander beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. The storm that had consumed their lives for weeks, months, even years had passed. And yet, the air still trembled with the memory of its fury. They didn't speak at first. Words felt unnecessary. The truth they had unearthed, the dangers they had survived, the webs of secrecy they had dismantled, none of it required narration. Each breath, each glance, was enough to acknowledge the enormity of what they had accomplished. The room smelled faintly of rain-soaked earth, of aged paper and ink, of candle smoke lingering like a whisper from the past. Alexander finally broke the silence. His voice was soft, distant, yet steady. It's done, at least. For now. Eleanor's fingers lingered on the ledger, tracing lines of names, locations and accounts that had once seemed untouchable. Each one was a story, a life, a choice, a consequence. It's strange, she murmured, to have all the power, and yet feel like we're just pieces moving through someone else's game. He looked at her, and for the first time since the cliffs of Scotland, his expression softened. Power isn't what matters. Survival isn't either. It's what we choose to do with it that defines us. She let the words settle, heavy and precise, as though they were carved into the space between them. Eleanor thought of her father, of the secrets he had carried to protect her, of the deal Alexander had struck to keep her safe, of the lessons learned in shadows, in quiet observation, in risk and trust. Every moment had led here to understanding, to truth, to a fragile kind of freedom. Freedom, the word felt new, almost foreign. She had signed contracts she didn't fully understand, made choices under pressure she hadn't yet comprehended, and walked through storms both literal and metaphorical. And now, standing here, she felt the weight of the past lift slightly, like the mist outside retreating with the sunrise. Alexander took a step closer. The flickering candlelight danced across his face, highlighting the lines of exhaustion and the faint scars from the weeks of hiding and planning. "You were more than I ever expected," he said quietly. "Stronger than I believed possible, braver, smarter, and yet human, always human." Eleanor let a slow smile curve her lips, one that carried relief, understanding, and something quieter, more enduring, recognition. "And you?" she asked softly. "What have you learned?" He looked toward the open window where the river glimmered in the first light. That control is an illusion. That even the most meticulous plans can't account for trust, for courage, for love. That some things, some people, are worth more than all the secrets in the world. She stepped closer, their hands brushing, tentative at first, then interlocking naturally, as though the moment had been waiting for them. Eleanor felt the pulse of life in his touch, the solidity of presence after weeks of shadows and uncertainty. In that simple connection, she understood everything that had been hidden beneath contracts, under threats, across continents of intrigue. The core of it all had been human, fragile, and unbreakable at once. Together they turned toward the wall of evidence. The ledger, the flash drive, the maps, everything that had dictated their journey were now instruments of closure. Eleanor carefully began placing the ledger and the device into a secure case. They would no longer be tools of fear, but archives of history, reminders of lessons learned, proof that truth had a shape, even in the shadows. Outside, the village awoke slowly. Mist curled around cobblestones, sunlight fractured through clouds, and the air smelled of wet stone and new beginnings. Eleanor and Alexander stepped out of the warehouse into the soft embrace of morning. Rain still clung to their coats and hair, but the chill was gentler, the sky lighter. Every step they took felt like reclamation, not of power, not of wealth, but of life, choice, and agency. They walked along the river, the water murmuring beneath the bridge, reflecting fragments of gold and silver. For a long time, neither spoke. Their silence was companionable, shared, filled with the quiet satisfaction of survival and understanding. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice low, reflective. "Do you think we would have found each other if the storm hadn't come?" Alexander glanced at her, eyes thoughtful, tracing the curve of the river, the movement of light on water. I don't know perhaps, but storms have a way of revealing what was always there, what we were blind to before, we see now, not because it was easier, but because it became necessary. She nodded, letting the weight of that sink in. All the contracts, all the schemes, all the danger had led to clarity. To this, to a moment where choice was no longer coerced, where trust was not demanded but earned, and where understanding was more powerful than any ledger or flash drive. A gentle breeze swept across the river, carrying the scent of earth and renewal. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting it brush against her face, and thought of the lessons she had learned, that protection could come from sacrifice, that love could emerge in the most unlikely circumstances, and that strength was not measured by what one could hold on to, but by what one was willing to release. Alexander reached for her hand again, fingers intertwining with hers. We have a long road ahead, he said quietly, but we've earned this moment. And whatever comes next, we face it together. Eleanor felt a calm settle within her, not the absence of danger, not the erasure of the past, but the presence of clarity, of understanding, of connection. Together, she echoed, letting the word anchor her, letting it be both promise and truth. The village below them began to stir. Children ran through the streets, unaware of the shadows that had danced above them. Markets opened, scents of bread and earth mingling with the cool morning air. Life moved on, persistent, unstoppable, indifferent to the webs of secrets they had untangled. And Eleanor felt, for the first time, not like a pawn, not like a survivor, but like someone who had carved a path through chaos and come to stand fully in the light. They paused at the edge of the riverbank, hands still intertwined. The water mirrored the sky's gradual shift from storm to calm. Eleanor looked at Alexander, then at the river, then at the village. The thought rose quietly in her mind. Life is fragile, but so is courage. One cannot exist without the other. Do you think, she asked softly, voice almost lost in the murmur of water, that anyone really chooses who they become? Alexander considered it, his eyes tracing the horizon. I think we make choices, he said slowly, and those choices carve the path. But sometimes, it's the storms, the things we daren't choose, that show us who we truly are. Eleanor let that settle, a quiet truth folding into her chest. They had been through storms of wind, rain, betrayal, and fear. And yet, here they were, standing, together, not unbroken, not untouched, but fully present, fully alive. She glanced at him, and for a moment the past months, the fear, the uncertainty, the relentless pursuit seemed to shrink to insignificance against the vastness of what they had found. Trust, understanding, and the quiet enduring power of connection. The sun crested higher, spilling golden light across the river. Mist swirled, lifting in soft eddies, revealing the world in gentle clarity. Eleanor let herself breathe deeply, fully, feeling the rhythm of life in her chest. The storm had passed, and with it, the fear. What remained was choice, and the profound, simple beauty of moving forward. Alexander squeezed her hand gently. The past will always be a part of us, he said, but the future is ours to shape. Eleanor smiled, the weight of history and consequence finally balanced with the hope of possibility. Then let's shape it, she said. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she believed it. They turned to walk toward the village, toward the light, toward a life reclaimed. Rain-soaked streets gleamed. The morning air was crisp, and the world seemed to hold its breath in the promise of new beginnings. As they moved forward, Eleanor reflected quietly, almost to herself, how much of life is truly our own. How much is shaped by choices, chance, and the courage to face the storms we cannot control. And yet, she knew with a deep certainty that whatever storms remained, she would face them not alone, but together, guided by trust, by love, and by the unshakable truth that some promises, once kept, never fade. The camera of memory, if one could imagine it, would pull back slowly. Eleanor and Alexander walking hand in hand along the riverbank, mist rising around them, sunlight glinting off water and wet stone. The village waking below, indifferent yet beautiful, shadows receding. And in that moment, everything that had been hidden, dangerous or uncertain seemed to fold into a single truth. Survival had brought understanding, love had emerged where it was least expected. And the storm, every trial, every secret, every sacrifice, had shaped not just who they were, but who